Imagine a place where the most dangerous criminals on Earth beg to stay imprisoned, where serial killers and cannibals fight legal battles not for freedom, but for the right to remain locked away forever, where the daily cost per inmate is $847, more expensive than luxury hotels in Paris, but the product being manufactured isn't comfort. It's the surgical removal of human hope. This is Black Dolphin Prison in Russia's frozen wasteland. IK-6, a $23 million fortress that solved the problem of containing the irredeemable by eliminating their desire to ever leave. Between 1998 and 2019, 127 inmates formally requested permanent residence in what they called honest hell, not because conditions were good, but because the mathematical precision of suffering had become more addictive than freedom itself. The architect who designed this machine, Viktor Petrov, drew inspiration from medieval oubliettes and CIA psychological warfare research. His goal wasn't punishment, it was domestication, the systematic conversion of human unpredictability into voluntary compliance. And it worked so perfectly that even the guards began showing brain patterns identical to long-term solitary confinement victims, despite only working 8-hour shifts. Today we're opening the classified files on history's most expensive prison experiment. We're going inside the concrete fortress, where choice was mathematically eliminated and human nature was rewritten through environmental design. This is the story of how Russia solved crime by creating something far more disturbing than any criminal: willing prisoners who prefer manufactured certainty to human freedom. If you're ready to explore the darkest corners of human psychology and the hidden costs of absolute control, stay with us. Because Black Dolphin's legacy isn't just about containing dangerous criminals. It's about what happens when we build machines that transform everyone they touch into prisoners of their own design. In the frozen wasteland of Russia's Orenburg region, 1,200 miles southeast of Moscow, where winter temperatures plunge to 40 degrees below zero, and summer heat bakes the earth at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, sits the most expensive prison on Earth. Not expensive because of luxury, but because of the mathematical precision required to manufacture despair. Black Dolphin Prison, IK-6, a fortress that costs $847 per day, per inmate, to operate, more than the finest hotel suites in Paris or Tokyo. But the product it delivers isn't comfort, it's the systematic removal of human hope, engineered with Soviet precision. This is the story of a machine built not to punish crime, but to transform human beings into willing prisoners of their own design. Where the ultimate sentence isn't death, it's the surgical removal of the desire to live anywhere else. The year was 1995. Post-Soviet Russia was drowning in blood. Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov, had just been executed for 52 murders. Alexander Pichushkin stalked Moscow's subways, claiming he wanted to kill as many people as there were squares on a chessboard, 64 victims to complete his game. Between 1991 and 1995, Russian authorities documented 47 separate cases of cannibalism. Not in the wilderness, in apartment buildings, in suburban neighborhoods, in the heart of civilization. The existing maximum security prisons were failing catastrophically. Lefortovo prison suffered an escape attempt that required military intervention. Vladimir Central became a corruption scandal when guards were found selling weapons to inmates. Across 12 facilities, prisoner riots caused $2.3 million in damages. But the most disturbing statistic was this: 23% of Russia's most dangerous criminals were choosing suicide over life sentences. They were creating martyrs. Dead killers became folklore heroes. The state needed something else, something that would make monsters beg to stay alive, while never wanting to truly live. On a secure phone line, Minister of Justice Valentin Kovalev spoke to an unnamed architect. "We need something that makes them beg to stay alive, but never want to live." The man who would answer that call was Viktor Petrov, a Soviet prison designer whose previous masterpiece had been psychiatric detention centers in Siberia, facilities where political dissidents simply disappeared into routine. Petrov approached this assignment like a mathematical equation. He studied 60 years of sensory deprivation research from CIA MKUltra programs. He consulted with former East German Stasi psychological warfare experts. He analyzed failure reports from 34 maximum security prisons worldwide. But his true inspiration came from history's darkest corners, medieval oubliettes, the forgotten chambers beneath French castles where prisoners were lowered through trapdoors and left to rot in 6-by-8-foot concrete tombs. Petrov had found his blueprint, not just in the dimensions, but in the philosophy: perfect isolation, achieved through perfect control. The land acquisition told the story of this project's true nature: 47 acres of former Soviet military territory, complete with underground bunkers purchased for exactly 1 ruble. 1 ruble, a symbolic gesture that masked the $23 million construction budget, money hidden across 7 different federal departments to avoid parliamentary oversight. Construction began in 1996. 18 months of work using materials that belonged in nuclear reactors, not prisons. 12-inch reinforced concrete walls, titanium alloy door hinges that would never rust or break, acoustic dampening foam originally designed for submarine warfare, technology that could muffle the sound of a human scream into absolute silence. 340 construction workers were required to sign 25-year confidentiality agreements. 12 workers who attempted to photograph the interior were arrested for state security violations. The concrete mixture contained a proprietary additive, the same compound used in Soviet reactor containment, that prevented drilling or chipping. It cost $847 per cubic yard. But the most disturbing detail came from a construction worker's diary, smuggled out 3 years later. During the concrete pour, we heard screaming from the walls, screaming that couldn't be explained by normal construction sounds. The supervisor told us it was air pockets releasing pressure. But air doesn't scream in Russian. Osin, March 15, 1998. Opening day. The first 23 inmates arrived under military escort, each traveling in individual armored vehicles with convoy routes changed 3 times for security. The transportation cost alone, $67,000 per prisoner. These weren't random killers. The selection criteria were precise. Only prisoners with confirmed kills of 3 or more victims, no living family members to advocate for them. Psychological profiles indicating antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic traits. They were chosen not just for what they had done, but for how completely they could disappear. Inmate number 0001 was Alexander Mikhailov, convicted of 17 murders across 3 Russian provinces. When the armored transport doors opened and he saw Black Dolphin for the first time, a windowless concrete monolith rising from the frozen earth like a tomb, Mikhailov made an unusual request. Not for a lawyer, not for medical attention, not for contact with the outside world. He asked for the daily schedule. He wanted to know exactly what his life would look like for the next 25 years, hour by hour, minute by minute. As if the routine itself was a kind of salvation. The first 72 hours revealed the machine's true design. Each inmate received a 47-page handbook detailing every minute of their daily routine for the next quarter century, printed on special paper that would dissolve if wetted, preventing its use as a weapon or tool. The welcome protocol was precise: medical evaluation, psychological assessment, cell assignment, and orientation to what the staff called the schedule. 6 a.m. wake-up, 47 minutes for meals, 23 hours of cell confinement, 17 minutes of exercise in individual concrete chambers with no view of sky, earth, or horizon. Every movement choreographed to prevent human connection, every moment accounted for, every possibility of surprise eliminated. Medical evaluations from that first week revealed something unprecedented. The inmates' cortisol levels, stress hormones, increased 340% compared to their previous facilities, higher than soldiers in active combat zones. Their bodies were in a state of constant alert, but there was nothing to fight, nothing to escape from, nothing to do but exist within the machine's mathematical precision. And then, on day 3, something happened that would define Black Dolphin's legacy. Inmate number 00007 formally requested to remain at Black Dolphin permanently, even if offered transfer to a normal maximum security facility, even if offered better conditions elsewhere. He wanted to stay in this place that was designed to break him. The architects had succeeded in creating the perfect prison. They just hadn't realized they were designing something that both guards and inmates would come to crave. A terrible certainty in an uncertain world. A place where human chaos was impossible, because human choice had been mathematically eliminated. The machine was running, and everyone inside it was about to discover that the most dangerous prison isn't one you want to escape from, it's one you never want to leave. The mathematics of misery began at exactly 6 a.m. Every morning, 700 inmates across Black Dolphin's 7 wings awoke to the sound of electronic chimes. Never human voices, never unexpected noise. The schedule was a masterpiece of psychological engineering. 47-minute eating periods, not 45, not 50. 17 minutes of exercise, not 15, not 20. The irregular precision prevented biological adaptation. Mealtimes varied by 3 to 7 minutes daily. Exercise periods rotated through 8 different time slots across the week. The human body craves rhythm. Black Dolphin gave them rhythm's evil twin, pattern without predictability. Time motion studies revealed that inmates averaged 247 steps per day. Less movement than patients in intensive care units. But this wasn't neglect. It was calculation, precisely enough movement to prevent muscle atrophy, not enough to generate endorphins or psychological relief. Each step measured, each calorie controlled, each breath accounted for in a symphony of manufactured helplessness. A guard's unauthorized recording captured something that would haunt the facility for decades, an inmate thanking him for the predictability. "Thank you for today being like yesterday," the voice whispered. "Thank you for tomorrow being like today." The architecture itself was a weapon against human connection. 4-foot-wide corridors made it impossible for 2 people to walk side by side. Curved hallways eliminated sight lines. You could never see more than 12 feet in any direction. Cell doors featured 2-inch viewing slots, but they were positioned at different heights to prevent eye contact between inmates and guards during routine checks. The acoustic engineering was perhaps the most sinister element. Sound-dampening materials reduced noise transmission by 94%, creating an environment where inmates could hear their own heartbeat, their own breathing, but never their neighbors' voices. The silence wasn't absence, it was presence, a thick, pressing weight that filled every space where human connection might have flourished. Each cell was maintained at exactly 64 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to require constant movement for warmth, but not cold enough to trigger official complaints about cruel and unusual conditions. The temperature existed in a legal gray zone, technically humane, practically torturous. After 20 years of operation, maintenance records revealed that inmates had worn grooves in their concrete floors from pacing. Some tracks were now 2 inches deep, paths worn into stone by human feet that had nowhere to go except in circles, marking time in a place where time had been weaponized against hope. The guards were as much prisoners as the inmates. They just got to leave every 8 hours. The protocols were absolute. Masked faces to prevent emotional connection, 2-hour rotation shifts to prevent familiarity, prohibition of personal conversation, mandatory psychological evaluations every 90 days. Only unmarried men between 23 and 35 could apply. No prior correctional experience allowed. They wanted blank slates, men who wouldn't compare Black Dolphin to normal prisons. The guards lived in on-site barracks with limited outside contact. Their selection process was as rigorous as military special operations, psychological testing, isolation tolerance assessment, and what internal documents called empathy suppression evaluation. They were looking for men who could treat human beings as mechanical components without psychological breakdown. The turnover rate was 78% within the first year, higher than combat infantry units. But those who stayed reported something disturbing in their psychological evaluations: addiction to the routine, The same mathematical precision that trapped the inmates began to comfort the guards. Some requested overtime shifts. Others asked to extend their 2-year contracts indefinitely. A leaked audio recording revealed guards discussing inmates by number only, having developed a superstition that learning their names brought bad luck. But what kind of bad luck? The kind that made you see the humanity in someone you were trained to treat as a mechanical problem. Between 1998 and 2019, 127 inmates formally requested to remain at Black Dolphin when offered transfers to other facilities. Each request required 3 psychiatric evaluations, 2 administrative reviews, and personal approval from the facility director. The processing cost, $4,200 per request. The paperwork alone filled filing cabinets with what staff called voluntary retention documentation. Dr. Elena Volkov, the facility psychiatrist, documented these requests with clinical precision. Inmates described other Russian maximum security facilities as chaos, unpredictable, and exhausting. They spoke of Black Dolphin as honest hell, a phrase that appeared in 93% of retention requests. When pressed to explain, inmates used remarkably similar language. Here, I know what happens next. Other places lie to you about getting better. This place tells the truth about what I am. The suicide statistics were the most revealing data point. Black Dolphin maintained a 3% suicide rate, significantly lower than the 14% average across Russian maximum security facilities. The inmates weren't killing themselves. They were disappearing into the machine, becoming components in a system that had successfully eliminated the chaos of human unpredictability. The economics of this human elimination were staggering. Annual operating costs, $217 million for 700 inmates. Per inmate expenses included $67,000 in annual medical care, 3 times the national average. $23,000 in specialized food preparation, using ingredients that met precise nutritional requirements without providing pleasure. $12,000 in what budget documents euphemistically called environmental maintenance. Environmental maintenance. The cost of manufacturing despair with scientific precision. Black Dolphin's per inmate cost exceeded the annual salary of 94% of Russian citizens. It was more expensive than elite private schools in Western Europe. But the product being manufactured wasn't education or luxury. It was the systematic conversion of dangerous human unpredictability into manageable, voluntary compliance. Hidden in the budget documents was a line item that would later trigger international investigation: behavioral modification research, totaling $2.3 million annually, funded by an unnamed government department. No research papers were ever published. No academic studies released. The money simply disappeared into the machine, funding work that officially didn't exist. Then came the first crack in the perfect system, June 15, 2003. Guard Captain Sergei Antonov, a 7-year veteran with exemplary performance reviews, suffered what internal reports called operational psychological failure during a routine shift. Security footage captured the breakdown in real time. Antonov removing his mask, speaking to inmates in whispers, repeatedly checking locks on already secured doors, and finally requiring sedation and medical removal. The post-incident investigation revealed that Antonov had been practicing what other guards called comfort protocols, minor rule violations designed to inject tiny amounts of humanity into the system. An extra 30 seconds during meal delivery. Eye contact during cell checks. Quiet words of acknowledgement when inmates thanked him for basic services. 67% of long-term guards admitted to similar violations in confidential interviews. The machine designed to eliminate human unpredictability was being undermined by human compassion, but the guards were suffering psychologically for their small acts of rebellion. Antonov's final report, submitted before his medical discharge, contained a warning that would prove prophetic. The inmates are not the only ones being changed by this place. Something is happening to us all. We're becoming part of the machine, and I don't think any of us know how to turn it off. The perfect prison had revealed its fatal flaw. It was too perfect. It didn't just contain dangerous criminals. It transformed everyone who entered into prisoners of a system that made chaos impossible and freedom unimaginable. The machine was running exactly as designed, and that was the problem. March 2019. The silent crisis. 17 guards requested psychological evaluation within 3 weeks, not because of inmate violence or security threats, but because they were losing the ability to distinguish between their professional and personal lives. The symptoms were unprecedented. Dreams about being inmates, compulsive checking of locks and security measures in their own homes, and what facility psychologists termed existential questioning about the nature of human containment. Dr. Marina Petrov, no relation to the architect, began unauthorized interviews with both guards and inmates. Her findings would shatter the illusion that Black Dolphin's psychological effects were limited to its intended targets. Brain scans of long-term guards showed activity patterns identical to inmates in long-term solitary confinement, despite working only 8-hour shifts. The isolation was infectious. The mathematical precision that governed the inmates' lives had begun to govern the guards' thoughts. They reported difficulty making decisions outside of structured protocols. Some requested permission to organize their personal lives according to institutional schedules. One guard, in his confidential psychological assessment, described his apartment. "I wake up at 6 a.m. even on days off. I eat meals in exactly 47 minutes. I've arranged my furniture so I can walk the same path every day. When my girlfriend moved in, I gave her a schedule. She left. I felt relieved." Dr. Petrov's unauthorized research revealed something that violated every assumption about human psychology. Black Dolphin had created institutional codependency, where guards and inmates developed symbiotic relationships despite minimal contact. The guards needed the inmates to validate their control. The inmates needed the guards to maintain their certainty. Both groups had become addicted to a system that eliminated human choice. The brain scans were damning evidence. Inmates showed increased activity in areas associated with learned helplessness, the psychological condition where subjects stop trying to escape negative situations even when escape becomes possible. But the guards showed patterns typically seen in caretaker burnout syndrome, combined with neurological markers of chronic stress and decision-making impairment. Dr. Petrov submitted her findings to an international human rights organization before authorities discovered her research. Then she disappeared for 72 hours. When she returned, she claimed no memory of her research and requested immediate transfer to a civilian hospital position. Her files were classified, but leaked excerpts would later surface with a chilling conclusion. The facility has successfully eliminated human unpredictability by converting both subjects and staff into components of a behavioral modification machine. October 2019. The European Committee for the Prevention of Torture demanded the first external inspection in Black Dolphin's 21-year history. The preparation process cost $1.7 million over 3 months. Fresh paint to cover the stains that marked 2 decades of psychological experimentation. New lighting systems to eliminate the deliberately oppressive atmosphere. Temporary policy modifications that softened daily routines to meet international human rights standards. But the inspection team, led by Swiss criminologist Dr. Hans Zimmermann, discovered something the administrators couldn't hide. Victor Petrov's original design notes, archived in facility storage and forgotten by successive directors. The notes revealed the truth that would change everything. The psychological effects weren't accidental byproducts of harsh conditions. They were the intended design outcomes. Petrov's handwritten philosophy, dated March 1997. Traditional incarceration fails because it maintains the illusion that criminals can choose rehabilitation. Black Dolphin succeeds by eliminating choice entirely. When human unpredictability is mathematically impossible, dangerous individuals become manageable through voluntary psychological surrender. The inspection report was classified immediately upon submission, but leaked excerpts described Black Dolphin not as a human rights violation, but as a successful experiment in behavioral modification that raises profound questions about the nature of free will and criminal justice. Dr. Zimmermann's private notes, published 3 years later in a Swiss academic journal, contained the most disturbing observation. We expected to find evidence of torture. Instead, we found evidence of something far more unsettling: the systematic conversion of human agency into mathematical compliance. The inmates weren't being broken. They were being domesticated. The Petrov papers changed everything. Viktor Petrov's complete design philosophy, revealed through the international investigation, exposed Black Dolphin as something unprecedented in human history, a facility designed not to punish criminals but to create voluntary incarceration dependency as a form of ultimate crime deterrent. Petrov's theoretical framework drew from animal psychology: zoo animals that refuse release into the wild, laboratory rats that choose familiar cages over unknown freedom, domesticated species that lose the ability to survive without human management. He saw Black Dolphin as domestication therapy for the irredeemably violent. His private journals, confiscated during the investigation, revealed the inspiration for his architectural choices. Human beings crave certainty above freedom. Given absolute predictability, even in suffering, most subjects will choose known misery over unknown possibility. Black Dolphin offers criminals something civilization denies them: perfect certainty about their place in the world. But the most chilling discovery was Phase 2 of Petrov's plan: juvenile facilities using Black Dolphin principles targeting children as young as 12. Construction had already begun on 3 facilities before the international investigation halted the program. The export model had been active for 5 years. Consulting contracts worth $2.3 million per facility design, with ongoing operational support worth $500,000 annually. Petrov's team had consulted on prison construction in 6 countries, spreading Black Dolphin's principles across the globe. Crime statistics in regions with Black Dolphin-style facilities showed 23% fewer violent crimes, but 31% increases in mental health institutionalizations among at-risk youth. The facilities were working as designed, not just containing dangerous individuals, but creating a psychological deterrent effect that eliminated the desire for criminal behavior by eliminating the capacity for unpredictable human action. A whistleblower released documents showing that the juvenile facilities were designed with even more intensive psychological controls. Children would be processed through developmental certainty programs that eliminated choice from their daily lives entirely. The goal wasn't rehabilitation. It was the creation of a generation that had never experienced human agency and therefore would never miss it. December 2019. International human rights pressure forced the Russian government to announce reforms. Viktor Petrov was quietly retired with full pension. Policy modifications were implemented to bring Black Dolphin into compliance with international standards. $4.8 million was allocated for facility improvements, longer exercise periods, group dining options, rehabilitation programs, and what administrators called choice introduction protocols. The reforms made the prison more humane by every objective measure, and they created the most disturbing development in Black Dolphin's history. Post-reform surveys showed that 89% of long-term inmates formally requested to return to the original protocols. They described the reforms as creating unbearable uncertainty in their daily routine. Group dining was chaos. Extended exercise periods were exhausting. Rehabilitation programs were lies about impossible futures. One inmate's written request, submitted 6 months after reforms began, captured the existential crisis. You gave us back choice, but we have forgotten how to choose. You gave us back hope, but we have learned that hope is suffering. Please return us to the honest hell we understand. We are not human beings anymore. We are something else, and something else cannot live in a human world. The question that haunted administrators, psychologists, and international observers was simple and terrible. If making the prison more humane caused the prisoners more distress, was Black Dolphin actually a success or a failure? The machine had worked exactly as designed. It had eliminated human unpredictability by eliminating the human capacity for choice. But in doing so, it had created something unprecedented: willing prisoners who preferred manufactured certainty to human freedom. The reforms continued, but they were reforms in name only. Black Dolphin had proven that some changes to human nature might be irreversible, and everyone involved was beginning to understand that the real prison wasn't the building. It was the transformation that occurred inside human minds when choice becomes mathematically impossible. The most dangerous criminals in Russia had been contained, but the method of containment had revealed something far more disturbing than any individual crime: the possibility that human agency itself could be systematically eliminated through environmental design. And if it could be eliminated in criminals, it could be eliminated in anyone. January 2020. The new normal at Black Dolphin arrived with the bitter irony that reform had become another form of punishment. The modified protocols attempted to balance international human rights compliance with security requirements. 2-hour daily group activities replaced solitary exercise. Supervised correspondence privileges allowed limited contact with the outside world. Quarterly family visits were introduced for the first time in the facility's history. Each innovation carried a price tag of $78,000 per inmate annually, the cost of forcing humanity onto minds that had been systematically trained to reject it. Current facility director Colonel Dmitry Kozlov, a career administrator who inherited Black Dolphin after the international investigation, found himself managing something unprecedented, a prison where rehabilitation had become a form of torture. In confidential interviews, he described the impossible position. We may have solved the wrong problem. The question was how to contain dangerous criminals. The answer was how to eliminate human choice. But no one asked what happens when you succeed too completely. Despite the reforms, Black Dolphin maintained a waiting list of inmates requesting transfer from other facilities across Russia. The reputation as preferable hell persisted, but now it attracted a different type of criminal: those who had heard whispers of a place where choice was impossible and found that prospect comforting rather than terrifying. The reformed facility had become an accidental laboratory for studying human adaptation to choice elimination. Inmates who had lived under the original protocols for over 20 years served as an unintentional control group, demonstrating what happened when human agency was systematically removed and then artificially reintroduced. The results were disturbing. 93% of long-term inmates experienced what psychologists termed choice paralysis when presented with rehabilitation options. Simple decisions: what to eat from a menu, which activities to attend, when to exercise, created stress responses equivalent to physical torture. Freedom had become physiologically painful. In 2023, Viktor Petrov agreed to his first and only interview about Black Dolphin's legacy. Now 73 and living in retirement in St. Petersburg, the architect who had redesigned human nature through concrete and steel reflected on his creation with the detachment of a scientist discussing a completed experiment. His apartment, he revealed during the interview, was designed using Black Dolphin principles: small rooms, minimal furniture, rigid daily schedule, and carefully controlled environmental variables. After creating that place, Petrov explained, "Chaos terrifies me. I wake at 6 a.m. every day, eat the same breakfast, follow the same routine. Not because I'm forced to, but because uncertainty has become unbearable. I designed Black Dolphin to solve the problem of human unpredictability in criminals. I didn't realize I was solving it in myself." Petrov's personal transformation revealed the true scope of Black Dolphin's influence. He had become a victim of his own architectural psychology, voluntarily imprisoning himself in routines that eliminated choice from his daily life. His St. Petersburg apartment featured the same narrow corridors, the same acoustic dampening, the same temperature control systems that he had designed for Russia's most dangerous criminals. When asked about his design philosophy, Petrov displayed the same mathematical precision that had characterized his prison architecture. Human beings evolved for uncertainty, but civilization demands predictability. Black Dolphin resolved that conflict by eliminating the human capacity for choice while maintaining the illusion of survival. The inmates weren't being punished, they were being optimized for existence in a world where agency creates suffering. The most chilling moment of the interview came when Petrov was asked if he would design Black Dolphin again, knowing what he now knew about its effects. He paused for exactly 23 seconds, a pause that was measured and timed by the interviewer, before answering. The question isn't whether I would, but whether I could stop myself. Once you understand how to eliminate human unpredictability, the knowledge becomes a compulsion. I see chaos everywhere now, and I want to fix it. Follow-up investigations into former Black Dolphin guards revealed that Petrov's condition wasn't unique. A 5-year study tracking 127 ex-employees found disturbing long-term effects that persisted decades after leaving the facility. 34% were unable to maintain employment in civilian security, reporting that normal workplaces felt chaotic and unmanageable. 23% required ongoing psychological treatment for anxiety disorders, specifically related to unstructured environments. 12% voluntarily sought employment in similar high-control environments, military installations, maximum security facilities in other countries, or corporate positions that replicated the rigid hierarchies they had experienced at Black Dolphin. But the most surprising finding was positive. Former guards showed higher than average marriage stability and significantly lower personal crime rates. The psychological training that made them unsuitable for normal employment had also eliminated their capacity for impulsive or destructive behavior. They had been domesticated as thoroughly as the inmates they once guarded. Dr. Elena Volkov, the original facility psychiatrist who had coined the term honest hell, finally agreed to explain what she had meant in her confidential reports from the early 2000s. Other prisons lie to inmates about the possibility of redemption, Volkov explained in a 2023 interview. They offer rehabilitation programs, educational opportunities, chances for parole, all of which maintain the fiction that criminals can choose to change. Black Dolphin was honest about what these men were, individuals whose capacity for choice had led to irreversible damage. By eliminating choice, we eliminated suffering. By eliminating hope for change, we eliminated the torture of constant failure. Volkov's explanation revealed the philosophical foundation that had made Black Dolphin so psychologically effective. It wasn't punishing criminals for their past choices, it was protecting them from the burden of future choices. In a world where decision-making had led to murder, cannibalism, and unspeakable violence, the elimination of decisions became a form of mercy. But Volkov's analysis raised more questions than it answered. If choice itself was the source of criminal behavior, what did that mean for human nature? If the most violent individuals found peace only when agency was eliminated, what did that suggest about the relationship between freedom and suffering? The economic analysis of Black Dolphin's 25-year operation revealed the true cost of perfect control. Total investment: $542 million. Operational expenses, construction costs, international legal fees, reform implementation, and ongoing psychological research. The question that haunted economists and criminologists was whether this investment had generated measurable returns for society. The methodology for cost-benefit analysis was complex and morally troubling. Researchers calculated the societal costs prevented through incapacitation of high-risk offenders, estimated victim impact costs, crime investigation expenses, court proceedings, and long-term trauma treatment for survivors. Against these theoretical savings, they measured Black Dolphin's operational costs and what economists termed human dignity depreciation, the societal cost of systematically eliminating human agency. The analysis suggested that Black Dolphin broke even if each inmate would have committed 3 additional murders if released, a number that was impossible to verify but statistically probable given their criminal histories. But the calculation ignored the broader psychological impact on society, the knowledge that human choice could be eliminated through environmental design, and that some individuals preferred this elimination to freedom. Economic analysis revealed Black Dolphin's true innovation wasn't punishment or rehabilitation, but crime prevention through voluntary self-elimination from society. The facility had created a new category of human existence, individuals who chose permanent containment because they had been convinced that choice itself was suffering. The global influence of Black Dolphin's principles extended far beyond corrections facilities. Investigation revealed Black Dolphin-inspired facilities operating on 6 continents, from ADX Florence in Colorado to specialized detention centers in Syria, China, and North Korea. Each adaptation modified Petrov's psychological control mechanisms to fit local legal systems and cultural contexts, but all maintained the core philosophy of eliminating human unpredictability through environmental manipulation. Comparative data across these facilities showed remarkably consistent results. 67% lower escape rates, 45% lower guard injury rates, but 78% higher guard resignation rates. The psychological techniques that made facilities more secure also made them psychologically unsustainable for staff members who retained normal human psychological patterns. More disturbing was the discovery that Black Dolphin's principles had influenced civilian architecture and management systems. Corporate offices designed with narrow corridors to prevent unofficial gatherings, educational institutions using acoustic dampening to eliminate unauthorized communication, digital surveillance systems that predicted and prevented disruptive behavior before it occurred. The philosophy of choice elimination had escaped the prison walls and begun influencing the design of normal human environments. Society was voluntarily adopting architectural psychology that prioritized predictability over human agency. As the investigation concluded, the final question emerged. In our global effort to contain the most dangerous criminals, had we accidentally created a model for human domestication that extended far beyond criminal justice? The mirror's edge reflected a disturbing truth. Black Dolphin's legacy wasn't contained within its concrete walls. The facility had succeeded not because it punished criminals, but because it offered them something that modern civilization increasingly denied to everyone: absolute certainty and purpose, even in suffering. In a world of overwhelming choice, infinite possibility, and constant uncertainty, Black Dolphin provided the terrible comfort of eliminated agency. Contemporary society showed increasing signs of choice paralysis, decision fatigue, and voluntary surrender of autonomy to algorithmic systems that promise to eliminate uncertainty. Social media platforms that curated experience to eliminate unpredictability. Corporate employment that traded autonomy for security. Political systems that offered simplified choices between predetermined options. The principles that made Black Dolphin effective: elimination of choice, predictable routine, algorithmic control of human behavior, had become features of normal life for billions of people who had never been convicted of any crime. As the camera pulled back from Black Dolphin's windowless walls to survey the wider world, the narrator posed the final question that haunted everyone who had studied the facility's history. In our quest to contain the dangerous, have we built a model that the rest of us secretly crave? And if so, who is really imprisoned? The inmates who chose certain suffering over uncertain freedom, or those of us who envy their terrible certainty? The machine that Viktor Petrov had built to solve the problem of criminal unpredictability had revealed something far more disturbing: the possibility that human agency itself might be an evolutionary mistake, and that the systematic elimination of choice might represent not the ultimate punishment, but the ultimate comfort in an uncertain world. Black Dolphin stood in the frozen wasteland of Orenburg, its concrete walls weathered by 25 years of Russian winters, its inmates grown old in their cells that had become more familiar than any home they had ever known. The facility continued to operate, continued to contain, continued to demonstrate that the most effective prison wasn't built to keep people in, but to make them never want to leave. And in a world where choice had become burden, where freedom had become anxiety, where uncertainty had become suffering, Black Dolphin remained the most honest place on earth, a fortress that had eliminated human unpredictability by eliminating humanity itself, one choice at a time, until choice became impossible, and impossibility became peace. The ultimate question remained unanswered. In our search for perfect security, had we discovered perfect prison, or had perfect prison discovered us?